Hey everybody, Cole here with Classic Mini DIY, and welcome to the answer segment of Ask CM DIY. This portion of my channel is all about getting questions from you guys and providing detailed, explained answers here in the answers segment, a whole separate episode just to dive into the answers for you guys. Now, I have my cheat sheet, which is all of the questions, all of the answers that I've already gone through and answered, but I'm gonna do what I can to provide you guys visual aids while I'm answering these questions if I have the kind of tools available or the things to show you available. So before we get started, I just want to say a big thank you to my patrons for helping make these episodes possible and for providing me the support necessary in order to do these big projects and share them with you guys. But with that, let's dive into the first question here and get this thing on the road. Let's first get the most important question out of the way, and this comes from a user, You Got It Covered, and he asks, what is the meaning of life? And of course, the only answer to that question is 42. Now that we have that out of the way, let's move into some of the mini questions. The next question I have is from a gentleman, Stephen K, and he says, do leak-free engines exist? I gave up a long time ago. And I will say that before I took my motor out, if you take care of your motor and you make sure that you put your seals on correctly when you do things and not incorrectly like I did with that valve cover that one time, we won't talk about that too much, but leak-free A-series motors do in fact exist. My motor was actually pretty leak-free. I didn't have any major problems with leaks, especially after the first time I rebuilt it, because I took extra care to go through and add Permatex to every single seam, every single seal that I put on there. Of course, not the head gasket, but all the important seals where I could put actual like Permatex like gasket sealer, I do, and it does help. It really, really does help. So keep chasing it. It does exist. Don't give up. I promise there is a way to get a leak-free A-series motor. The next question I have is from Elmer Santos, and he asks, do you have any welding tips for the mini type of metal? Thickness, what amperage to use on a MIG welder not to blow a hole through the mini, and trying to fix some holes around the rear quarter window. Thank you. Well, Elmer, I am really sorry I'm not a welder. I don't have any insight that I can provide you there, but what I will say is those of you who are watching this episode, if you're welders and you have some extra great tips that you want to share with Elmer, post them in the comment section below. Elmer, hopefully we'll get some nice answers from people. The mini community is pretty wonderful, so I'm hoping they might have some tips for you. The next question is from Minisaurus, and Minisaurus has been on a few of my live streams. Hi, welcome back to this episode if you're watching, and he asks, why don't you fit a later Mark 1 or Mark 2 heater in your Classic Mini? To be honest, the main two reasons that I'm putting a new heater in there are, one, I want something smaller. This thing is big. It is big and bulky, and it's not super, super effective. The second reason that I want to get a smaller compact heater and not put this one in here is that this one is really, really loud. The bearings inside this motor are pretty much just done. I mean, it'll keep running, it'll keep blowing air. It's not that quiet. And I know a lot of you probably think, Cole, you are crazy. The car is not a quiet car. I drive it literally as close to every day as I can, assuming everything is working, obviously. And even the smallest changes in the amount of sound that I can kind of prevent, quiet down, things like that is a huge quality of life improvement for driving this car. All right, so now for our next question, we have something from Mike Perry, and he says, just rebuilt my wife's 998. It was running fine, but the other day it stopped running sometimes, and I have spark and then I don't have spark. It's a definite non-runner, very stumped. It is getting fuel. So now I have a small list of things that I would recommend checking, and this is kind of like the common places where you're going to run into problems with your ignition system, getting spark, and the first thing on that list is checking your battery. Check to make sure that you have high enough voltage on your battery. If it's an old battery and it's low voltage, it's not going to deliver enough power to the ignition coil to provide a constant, nice, strong spark to your spark plugs. Once you have gotten that tested, once you've confirmed that it's definitely not the battery and you have good voltage there, The next thing to move through is literally just follow that battery cable through the whole flow from battery all the way over to the actual spark plug. Now, I'm going to go over a few things here that should help you out there. The second thing that I would recommend doing after checking that battery is coming in, and let's see if I can get a good shot of this for you. Now, you'll see here, this is your distributor cap. And inside the distributor cap, you have these little contacts. And these contacts often get kind of corroded and worn down over time. And this is a common place for things to not actually deliver the full spark to your spark plugs. There's obviously 4 of these, each one of those going to one of the leads that go to your spark plugs. Now, what I recommend doing here is popping that cap off, and if you see any corrosion on those, get a small screwdriver and just kind of scrape these off and make sure that that metal's nice and clean, no corrosion, and that's going to make sure that there is a good contact between your rotary and the actual distributor cap leads. So that's a common place, especially if it's not been running for a while. It will kind of corrode there. After you've cleaned those, and after you've made sure that they are clean, the next thing is to check your actual rotary here. Now, this is my old distributor, and it doesn't have points, which I'm going to get into here in a minute, but you can see here, this rotary here is actually starting to get a little like worn on the end there, and that is enough to kind of start to cause some problems. So if that's starting to get worn like this, it might be worthwhile changing the rotary. And then if you're in here doing that, I did mention points just a second ago. Points are what kind of help deliver the spark and make sure that that spark actually happens when it needs to. Now, in my car, I've long since trashed those points. Points are a pain in the ass, and I do not like dealing with them. And there are modern conversions. You can put this on pretty much any distributor, and this uses an electromagnetic signal to help determine when this should actually spark. It's pretty simple. And this whole unit right here just replaces your point system, and they have instructions on how to plug these in. I'll put a link in the description below. If the other stuff that I mentioned already solves your problem, I still strongly recommend replacing it. These things are like 40 to 60 bucks online, and it makes things much more reliable, especially in the rain, as well as just overall quality of life improvements, which I am all about on this car. It's kind of the whole motto of the Bad Wolf mini build. Now, the next question I have is from John James, and he says, "Hey Cole, on my engine block, I removed the cylinder head, and there are a couple of holes that look like channels that are covered. Is this normal on the 998? Now, not really. There shouldn't be any holes that are covered. Is there like corrosion on the top of the block or on the bottom of the cylinder head? Maybe you can shoot me some pictures. I'd be happy to help you out a little bit more. My email address is classicminidiy@gmail.com. But I do have a 998 rebuild video, which should be popping up in one of the corners here. If you head over there, check it out. I linked the video specifically that shows the top of the block. So you can take a look at that and figure out and compare with your block to kind of make sure that your block looks good. But if you want to send me those pictures or ask a little bit more detail, I'm more than happy to help you out. Now, the next question is from another mini YouTuber. It's Tom Mason. If you haven't seen his channel, check it out. Also, should be popping up in one of the corners here. He has some great stuff, and he has 2 questions. The first one is, can you have a bracket fabricated for the heater? And the short answer to that is yes. Yes, I can. I'm not really gonna do fabrication. I'll show you guys in that video, but yes, short answer, yes, I can. Second question is, have you seen the video on my channel about the exhaust that I kindly sent him? So Tom Mason was one of the people who actually won the contest, and it was perfect because he also was the one who was specifically looking for that exhaust so he could weld it back together. He does have a video on how he did that. That is the video that I linked just a second ago. His channel's great. He's got some really great information, especially about welding. So for the viewer who asked about welding, he is a great source to kind of learn and see how it's done on an actual Mini Cooper. And Tom, one piece of totally unsolicited advice. I have been watching all of your episodes. They're great and I love them. One tip I have for you from one mini YouTuber to another is to try and equalize your sound. You would do wonderfully if you had a microphone or you just reduce the audio level for the music that you put on your time lapses. Otherwise, I love your channel, and for those of you who haven't seen it, check it out, subscribe. He's a good dude and deserves lots of views. Okay, so the next question I have is from a gentleman named Joey Ververs. Sorry if I mispronounced that. He says, I'm in the middle of a Mark III restoration and just restored a 998 engine with the help of your vids. I'm really happy that those were helpful for you. Thank you for the shout out there. I think it would at least take me another year to finish up the car so that the engine can go in and run. What is the best way to store and rebuild the engine in the meantime? Full of oil and coolant or almost empty? I didn't fit the radiator yet, so now the coolant system is open and I don't want it to rust again. Tongue out face. So here's my tips for storing your motor, because I have had to store this motor for a little over a month now. And let me just say, sorry for the cicadas. This is the South and it gets super loud in the afternoon. They love to just sing. But I've been storing this for about a month, and the keys to storing your motor properly and making sure things don't go bad on it. One is, with the whole radiator system, I personally don't like to store it with fluid in it, especially if it's a 50-50 mix of water and antifreeze. The water is only going to serve to corrode the inside of the motor more. Some people might disagree with me there, but my personal preference is no coolant, and I also don't store it with oil in it. If I took oil out of the car when it all came apart, you know, it's got oil, it's got residual oil kind of coating the parts inside. But once you start taking it apart, you're definitely going to want to coat those parts with, you know, some sort of lubricant to prevent them from rusting and getting bad. The other thing that's super, super important is making sure it's in a clean place. So right now, the motor is sitting kind of outside my workroom, and if I had my way about it, this is not where I would store it. However, I do keep it covered, I do keep it sealed around the base, and all of the main openings that actually allow oil into the system are covered when it's sitting here and, you know, I'm not working on it. The only thing that I don't have on here right now that would make me feel a little bit better would be a rocker cover, but that should be coming in the mail here pretty soon. So that would be my tips for storing the motor. Once you start taking it apart, be extra, extra vigilant about making sure things are coated with oil while they're in storage. And then once you start putting it back together, you know, you can clean those oil off the bare metal pieces and, you know, especially the sealing surfaces once you start putting it all back together. Now the next question I have is from Paul P. Mini Build. And his question is, what is your most hated mod that you've seen on a Mini? I know we all have different tastes, so this is going to be my opinion. And he says that he doesn't like Minis with super wide wheels and arch moldings, but that's just his personal taste. So Paul, I will say the things I really, really don't like on the Mini, which is not that many things. I actually quite like the kind of variety of the Mini Cooper and all the different people who drive them. You just end up with so many different kinds of combinations on the car. The main thing that I don't like, and I don't even know if it's really considered a modification to the car, but I really, really don't like messy wiring, messy insides of the motor, like shit just all over the place. It's not for me. I know that that's not something that someone necessarily chooses to do, but if you're working on your car and you don't take the effort to kind of clean up those wires, it just drives me bonkers. So that would be more of like a pet peeve on the car. If I had to pick a specific modification though, it's those enormous body kits. Just not a fan. I know lots of people, I've met a few people here who have those body kits on their Minis, and you know, it's their car, they can do what they want with it, but it is not for me, not at all. You probably saw a screenshot popping up over here, so you guys have an idea what I'm talking about, but to each their own. The next question I have is actually related to some of the parts I've used on this car and for some of my tools. And this is coming from Andy. He sent me an email and he says, "Hi Cole, thanks for the videos. Thank you for the kind words. A couple of questions for consideration in the Q&A session. The waterless coolant test was cut a little short, but would you use it again if you had to pay for it? Does the Milwaukee right angle impact wrench have enough torque for all the jobs on the Mini?" And then the last question I'll save after I answer those first two. Now, if you haven't seen my waterless coolant video, I did it about Christmas time last year, and it was in partnership with Evans Waterless Coolant. Now, Evans waterless coolant is a product that's sold here in the US and overseas, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a coolant that doesn't use water at all. Now, I had that running in my car all the way up until the point where I drained it when I took the motor out for the Bad Wolf mini build. And if I could do it again, would I get that coolant? Yeah, I absolutely would get that coolant. I would still recommend it. I would still do it on my Mini, and I'm planning to do it on my Mini. I'm going to have to buy more when I put the motor back in. They're not going to be sending me any free stuff this time. And I'm going to purchase it again. I'm really happy with it. It cooled well, and I've kind of droned on about this, but you get the idea. The second question is about this Milwaukee wrench. Now, this Milwaukee wrench has seen a lot of abuse. I have used this for a few years now, but don't confuse it with a proper torque wrench. I think that question, it seems like you might be kind of thinking, well, does this have the torque to be able to do all the things that you want to do on the Mini? And it does. It's one of those things that I keep in the car when I can, when I go on long trips especially. But it does have a good amount of torque. I think that its electric torque is like 27 foot-pounds. It's not like crazy over the top, but when you torque it down, this can be a little loud, you get that kind of impact effect, and it helps drive those bolts in. But it does have a tendency to strip out bolts on things like aluminum casings, so you gotta be careful there. This does not replace an actual torque wrench though. Now, Andy has one last question, and this is actually more about the Mini itself. And he asks, is there a straight cut gearbox option you or your friends have had experience with that gives the whine sound but isn't too loud and, obnoxious? And I have learned some new stuff about straight cut gearboxes. I can thank Paul Jeffries for this valuable information. He is the one who built my crosspin diff for me, but he gave me some great info about straight cut boxes. I personally have never run one before. And what I've heard is that if you convert the box itself, the gears inside your actual gearbox to straight cut gears, but you don't convert the drop gears coming from the top of the motor and down into the gearbox, you're going to have a lot less whine. It's going to be quieter. Paul explained to me that the majority of your sound, the really loud sound, is actually coming from the drop gears. They're a little bit more exposed than the rest of the gearbox internals, kind of like below the motor. But those drop gears are going to be the ones that kind of generate that noise. So, having never experienced it myself, I can't say definitely how loud that is. So it might still be too loud for what you're looking for, but if you do want to take the chance, you can buy a straight cut box and keep the drop gears helical cut. All right, so the next question is from a gentleman named Phil Robbs, and he had a couple questions, one of which it looks like was answered by one of my videos, so I'm glad that helped you out. But the other question was, my oil leak is just between the block and the gearbox casing. The engine runs fine. Do I need a set of engine rebuild gaskets to fix this? I don't really need to replace any parts that I know of. We'll inspect the clutch plate when it comes off. Also, I see you use black gasket sealant a lot. Some people say fit dry. What are your thoughts on the sealant and why? So I have heard both the opinions about yes to the sealant, no to the sealant, but I'll get into that in just a minute here. What I want to know about your oil leak is where exactly it's coming from, because you say that it is at the block and the gearbox, and the place that I'm imagining right there immediately is from here to here, or on the other side in the exact same spot. And honestly, that's actually a pretty uncommon place for these things to leak. So my question is maybe is it leaking from higher up and dripping down, or were you referring to underneath here where, like under the radiator where it meets the block there? Because that actually is a more common place for it to leak. Not saying it's not leaking in the place that you said, I just want to make sure I understand. I will say that taking the engine apart, there is virtually no way that you can take the engine apart without having to replace a good deal of parts when the motor's apart. And if you do take the motor apart and you don't replace things and you don't re-clearance things, you're really doing yourself a disservice, because what's going to end up happening is you're not going to be really addressing any of the issues that are inherent in these motors. Metal swells, metal shrinks, things wear down. It's really common, and it's probably happened to your car already. And especially if the motor hasn't been rebuilt recently, things like your primary gear are going to need to get reshimmed. Down in the gearbox, there are sections of the gearbox that will need to get reshimmed, and you're going to need to remeasure things. Differential especially, that's going to have to get kind of reassessed. You know, if you don't take it apart, sure, you can kind of just say, okay, I'm just going to ignore that. You know, it's probably okay, and you might be fine. But if you have the engine out, if you have it apart, especially if you have it apart all the way down to here, it is so worth it to just go ahead and replace the things that are in there that are worn, the major wear points, and also replace the gaskets. Now, talking about the gaskets specifically, I do use Permatex on all of mine. And the reason I use Permatex there is because time and experience has shown me that consistently it prevents it from leaking. The places that I put Permatex, the places that I seal that way, especially after cleaning the surfaces and making sure that it creates a tight seal, they don't leak. I don't have problems. And personally, that's enough evidence for me to keep doing that. You know, there are places where you just will never put Permatex, you know, like your head gasket. But otherwise, I don't see any reason not to put it on there. You know, there are some old engine builder dudes that just swear by not putting Permatex on there. But I think it's a modern thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do. So hopefully that answers your question. It feels like it might have been a little preachy, but it was not my intention. But if you have any other questions about that, or you want to share a little bit more detail about where it's leaking, I'd be happy to give you some more guidance there. All right, so the next question I have is from Daryl, and he actually has 4 questions. So you're really milking this question and answer session, Daryl, but I'll let it slide this time. The first question is thoughts on sway bars and installation. I have always wanted to try putting a sway bar in, and kind of long-term goals is actually to do a video on that, but there is a lot of swirl. There's a lot of argument on the internet about whether or not it's really necessary on an old Mini. They're so small, they're so low to the ground that the whole body roll issue is kind of a moot point. But that said, I don't really care. I still want to try it out. So if I ever put a sway bar on the Mini, I will definitely do an installation video for you guys. So long term, keep that on the horizon. Question 2 is, how about a video of the difference between the changes over the years between Mark 1 to Mark 7? I would absolutely love to do that. And once the car's back on the road, you know, I might be able to put something together. I will say that owners of Mini Coopers here in the United States are some of the most unreliable people when it comes to planning something. It is basically impossible. It always starts off with 15, 20 Minis. Oh yeah, we're going to this thing. And then it boils down to like 2 or 3. The hard part will be getting a full range of Minis to show you, especially the later Minis, because I think that the Mark 7 Minis are still illegal to import here. So maybe on the horizon, would love to do that. I do dive into this a little bit in my Mini Buyer's Guide videos. Those are a little bit older, just pop up in the corner here. Check that out if you haven't seen those. Question number 3 is where are you at with the Moke engine? Now, for those of you who don't know, this is the Super 998 that I was building for a friend of mine, Justin. And that motor is pretty much put together, minus the gearbox, and it's actually back up at Justin's house. But the reason we haven't done any more videos on this is actually pretty simple. The engine lift that he needs to use, and that we would need to use in order to finish filming that, is the one that I use for Bad Wolf Mini. And then additionally, you know, we just got to kind of sync up time. He's got kids, and you know, it's all about finding that sweet time to actually, you know, get in there, film. So I want to make sure that it's a good video for you guys, and it'll be after I put the motor back in Bad Wolf Mini. We will bring that engine lift back up there, and we should be filming that, if all goes well, maybe late August. And I do have some surprises for you guys when we do actually get to filming that. So, all right, so the next question I have is from a gentleman named Toonie Briz. He says, hi, I just got a 94 Japanese SPI Mini. Congratulations on your new car. We'll be swapping it to left-hand drive. Saw your video on it, but no mention of work being needed around the pedal assembly. Also, the recommendation of the braking system, and any comments on that would be appreciated. So to start off, I did have a left-hand drive conversion video. I did miss a few things, and I'm really sorry about that. Looking back on that, there was a few things I needed to add, but one of those is the pedal assembly, and the pedal assembly will need to get swapped over. That said, it is not super difficult to swap, and it is the same on both sides. So on this side, you're looking at the 2 master cylinders, one for your clutch and one for your braking system. Now these things actually just move over to this side over here where these two holes are. Obviously they're plugged up right now, but normally heater hosing goes in on whatever side the cylinders aren't on. So the brake and the clutch, that moves over just 1-to-1, should bolt right up, no problems, assuming nothing over here has been modified, things like that. But the issue you do run into is related to your accelerator pedal. And it's a little bit more when you're moving it from left-hand drive to right-hand drive. But on the right-hand drive minis, your pedal is kind of bent inwards so that it doesn't impact your wheel well. And if you move it over to the left side, it's just gonna look kind of weird and it might not fully, move the way it should. So to remedy that, you would want to get a new gas pedal, a new accelerator pedal, and mount that up on the correct side. All the bolts and things, all the holes should be there. The nice thing about the Mini is that they were built to work on either side. So left-hand drive, right-hand drive, they came out of the factory the same and were put together the way they needed to be based on the market they were being sold in. Now, the next question I have is from Pete Pedro Anderson. And what he asks is, why are classic minis such a bastard? And in my opinion, they are like women. They want you to put energy in and show them that you love them. And when you put in lots of energy to really show them that you love them, they will reward you with their love until they get mad at you for something that you've done incorrectly, and then they will leak oil everywhere, which I guess isn't really what women do. But you gotta put the work in, man, and then you get the love. The second thing he asks is, I would like to see a detailed video on engine hose replacement though, Cole. And I would say, I don't know exactly what hoses you want me to show you how to replace, but I would be happy to do a video on that. Did you have any in mind, or were you thinking you wanted to replace everything? And if it's everything, I can kind of give you an idea of it. Keep an eye out on the engine kind of assembly video, and I'll mention some stuff about hose replacement. I'll mention how to connect them, where to get to them, all those kinds of important things. But I will say, one thing, if you are replacing all your hoses on the car, one that's going to be a pain in the butt is this one right here. It is in the back of the motor, and it getting down to this spot right here, oh, you're gonna be mad. You're gonna get real mad. All right, so the next question I have is from Mini BK, and he asks, what are your tips for starting the motor on the bench after a rebuild? Well, personally, I just put the motor in the car. However, that said, that is not always the most effective way to deal with something like this. Having it on the bench is a great way to, field test the motor before you do all the effort of putting it back in the car. So if you are keen on doing that, what you are going to want to do is focus on a few things. One, make sure you're retaining oil. Make sure you put oil in it. It's very easy to forget that, surprisingly. The next thing I would recommend is setting up a little starter button. I've seen these buttons on Mini Coopers in the past, and it mounts right in the front there, and it connects to your starter, and it basically allows you to walk up to the front of the motor and just press the button to start it. Super, super helpful, especially when you're first trying to start the motor after a rebuild. And then what I would say is probably the most important one is making sure that you have adequate cooling. Now, that doesn't mean just having the radiator connected and having coolant running to it. You are going to want air passing over the radiator, and you are going to want to have a temperature gauge so you can monitor that, especially when you're running it in for the first time. It gets hot, and if there's no air flowing over that radiator, it's going to overheat, like almost definitely. It's got to have air passing over that. And I wouldn't rely just on the fan in the actual motor to actually do that. All right, so we only have 3 questions left, and the next one is from Juan Zamora, and he says, hi, I'm in Puerto Rico, and I'm thinking about putting air conditioner in my Classic Mini. It has a 1275, any suggestions? Now, I do have a few things that I would say. One, getting an air conditioner in your Mini, it's tight. The space available to you in that engine bay is very, very tight, especially when you have a later model car. There's way more stuff up there that is going to take up space. Secondly, when you add things onto your belt drive, you are going to be losing power when the AC is on. It's just the nature of it. You've got that belt running over the AC compressor, and that puts drag on your motor and you lose power that way. It's not like, debilitating, but it is something to consider. But as far as finding one, that is the hard part. I don't know of any Classic Mini air conditioner systems that are not original from Japan. Your best bet is probably going to be trying to find one that's in Japan or has recently come from Japan. The Japanese Minis had ACs in them, so those systems were pretty much built for the Mini, but it does also take up a lot of space in your passenger compartment, so it's just things to consider. You also probably want to have your money ready because there are lots of people who are trying to buy these for their Classic Minis. The next question is from Joshua Melton, and he says, how do you feel about importing JDM Minis, fuel injection, air conditioning, or do you prefer older Minis, and why? JDM Minis are legit. I love JDM Minis. I love pretty much any Mini Cooper that has the classic body style. I don't discriminate. I'm not like, oh, Mark I purist, you know. I love them all. I think they're all cool. They all have different characteristics. I like my Mark I because it's a little simpler, but those JDM Minis are pretty cool. The fuel injection systems, I can either take it or leave it. If I was going to put fuel injection on my car, I would probably move to something like a 7-port head, which is what I was thinking about doing, or simply a fuel injected system from Specialist Components. They make a really cool EFI system that is probably the most reliable one that you can get for a Classic Mini at this time. All right, and so for the last question, I have something from Flying Ambo, and he says, have you ever had any experience with a belt drive camshaft? And the belt drive cam systems are pretty cool. There's one that's sold specifically from MED Engineering. They're actually the ones that I bought my adjustable cam gear from. And I will say their adjustable cam gear, amazing quality. I would buy that again in a skinny minute. But they recently revamped their belt drive system, and that thing is super cool. Now, here's my opinion on belt drive systems. I have heard a lot of things about the fact that the belt drive systems are more reliable, they're quieter. Just in general, they are great systems to put on your Mini. A belt drive system does require a little bit more kind of like know-how about how to set up the timing on your Mini. It's not awful, and anybody can definitely learn it, but it does take a little bit more of a learning curve to install that on your car. And one thing that always just kind of sat in the back of my head about this and about belt drives. So the nice thing about a chain drive is that failure on a chain drive is very unlikely. What you end up with more frequently is stretching of the chain. Now, if you buy a good high quality chain from 7 Mini Parts or from MED if you're buying their kit, those chains are virtually indestructible. They don't stretch. They're awesome. They are really high quality. But those are the kinds of issues you run into with a chain drive. The nice thing about a belt drive is it doesn't stretch, ever. Like, it just doesn't stretch. But if it ever breaks, if by some fluke one of those belts break, it just breaks. There's no stretching, there's no kind of like slow failure. If it breaks, it fails, and your motor will lose its mind. The pistons are going to be totally unsynchronized from your camshaft. Your motor's going to just take a shit. And I don't say this just to like scare you guys or anything, but that's the main reason I didn't put a belt drive on my car, is because it just makes me so nervous. But who knows? It might be completely unwarranted. There is another Mini YouTuber, Jamal, who actually did a belt drive on a motor recently. I should have a link popping up in the corner. He has some great information. He also has kind of a review about it. So check his channel out. He's a cool dude. He's actually here in the United States. Great information. Really, really smart guy. So hopefully that answers that question for you. That's it for this answers episode of Classic Mini DIY. I hope you guys liked it. I tried to spice it up a little bit with a little bit more views of the stuff that I'm talking about rather than just talking. But let me know what you think. Post some comments, hit the like button if you like it, and I'll know next time that this is something that you guys would like to see more of. But it's Friday today. This video is probably going to come out tonight or tomorrow morning, and then I'm going to be putting the motor in this weekend. And I am so excited to share that with you guys. But that video probably won't be ready until midway through next week, so keep an eye out for that. And if you have any questions that didn't get answered in this, if you asked me a question and I missed it, I'm really, really sorry. And feel free to post them in the comment section. I'll try and answer it there. Otherwise, thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, enjoy those minis and motor on.